The Old Man and the Sea, Part 28. Do you believe the great DiMaggio would stay with a fish as long as I will stay with this one? He thought. I'm sure he would, and more, since he's young and strong. Also, his father was a fisherman. But would the bone spur hurt him too much? I do not know, he said aloud. I never had a bone spur. As the sun set, he remembered, to give himself more confidence, the time in the tavern at Casablanca, when he had played the hand game with the great Negro from Cienfuegos, who was the strongest man on the docks. Keep in mind that the hand game we're talking about arm wrestling. You know, we both hold each other's hands, and then I try to push your hand to the table. You try to push my hand to the table. So this is the hand game, arm wrestling. So keep in mind he is remembering that in order to give himself self-confidence. They had gone one day and one night with their elbows, right? Elbows on the chalk line on the table, and their forearms straight up, and their hands gripped tight. Each one was trying to force the other's hand down onto the table. There was much betting, and people went in and out of the room under the kerosene lights, and he had looked at the arm and the hand of the Negro and the Negro's face. They changed the referees every 4 hours after the first 8 hours so that the referees could sleep. Keep in mind that, for example, in a soccer game, the guy that is going to see if people are going to commit fouls and things like that is not the judge. Be careful not to say that. He is the referee, okay? So a referee would be the guy who would be looking at the arm wrestling there, and he would make sure that nobody's cheating. But of course the match lasted so long they had to change referees, as you saw. Just observation here, onto the table would be the correspondent of into, but of course with the difference of meaning. What do I mean by that? My hand is in my pocket, okay? So it's a static preposition. I'm putting my hand into my pocket. You have movement, right? Now my pencil is on my desk, okay? I'm putting my pencil onto my desk. But keep in mind that nowadays, onto, with this idea of movement, is kind of forgotten, or it's being forgotten. Well, it's very common for people to say onto, on, where traditionally people would say onto. For example, imagine a cat, all right? The cat is out of the table, and then the cat is jumping onto the table, according to my explanation. But nowadays, on the table is pretty acceptable as well. So nowadays it sounds a little bit older, right? And if you use it a lot, or if you really need people to understand that it's not into, okay? For example, there is a video here at CCA Material where the surfers, it's a kind of tow-in surfing, the surfers are slingshot onto the waves, right? Because of course they're not slingshot into the waves, they would drown, and it would be difficult to surf that way. Okay, going back to our book. Blood came out from under the fingernails of both his and the Negro's hands, and they looked each other in the eye, and at their hands and forearms, and the bettors, people that bet, went in and out of the room and sat on high chairs against the wall and watched. The walls were painted bright blue, and were of wood, and the lamps threw their shadows against them. The Negro's shadow was huge, and it moved on the wall as the breeze moved the lamps. Keep in mind we are seeing the whole scene through the eyes of the old man. Okay, we are here, the other guy is in front of us, and then we look at his arm, we look at his face, we look at the walls, you know, the shadow of the other guy, things like that. The odds is like the probabilities, you know, it's like the higher chance of who would win. The odds would change back and forth all night, and they fed the Negro rum and lighted cigarettes for him. Fed is the passive feed. You can feed the baby, you give food to the baby. Then the Negro, after the rum, would try a tremendous effort, and once he had the old man, who was not an old man then, but was Santiago el Campeón, nearly 3 inches off balance, you know, because they were like in a dead end, but the Negro at that part had him 3 inches off balance. Yeah. But the old man had raised his hand up to a dead even again. He was sure then that he had the Negro, who was a fine man and a great athlete, beaten. He had the Negro, who was a fine man and a great athlete, beaten. And at daylight, when the batters were asking that it be called a draw, when it's a draw, like in soccer, one team has 2 goals and the other team has 2 goals. Okay, it's a draw. We're asking that it be called a draw, and the referee was shaking his head. He had unleashed his effort and forced the hand of the Negro down and down until it rested on the wood. The match had started on a Sunday morning and ended on a Monday morning. Many of the batters had asked for a draw because they had to go to work on the docks loading sacks of sugar, or at the Havana Coal Company. Otherwise, everyone would have wanted it to go to a finish. But he had finished it anyway, and before anyone had to go to work. For a long time after that, everyone had called him the champion, and there had been a return match in the spring. But not much money was bet, and he had won it quite easily, since he had broken the confidence of the Negro from Cienfuegos in the first match. I like this part. There is this psychological, I prefer to call it spiritual. There is this spiritual sense to the game. Okay, apparently you have an amount of strength according to this part, but depending on your spirit, that strength can be multiplied, you know. And it's incredible. I don't think movies are wrong when, you know, like you see some characters in movies, like action movies, right? So there is a character, he's stabbed and then he falls to the floor, and you know, he's agonizing and probably he's going to die. And then there is another one who is a tough guy, and usually tough guys are very determined. He's stabbed again and again, and he raises, and then he continues fighting with the knife, in his stomach or whatever. I think it's the spirit who is giving strength to the body, you know. And I think that's the point. The Negro didn't get weaker, you know. He didn't lose muscle capacity between one match and the other match, right? And I don't believe the old man, Santiago, right? Santiago el Campeón. I don't believe Santiago el Campeón got much stronger from one match to the other. But their spirits were different. After that, he had a few matches and then no more. He decided that he could beat anyone if he wanted to badly enough. Again, the spirit over the body. He decided that he could beat anyone if he wanted it badly enough. And he decided that it was bad for his right hand for fishing. He had tried a few practice matches with his left hand, but his left hand had always been a traitor and would not do what he called on it to do, and he did not trust it. The sun will bake it out well now, he thought. So now we're back to the boat with the old man. And he's talking about his left hand that is all cramped, right? The sun will bake it out well now, he thought. It should not cramp on me again unless it gets too cold in the night. I wonder what this night will bring us. An aeroplane passed overhead on its course to Miami, and he watched its shadow, scaring up the schools of flying fish. With so much flying fish, there should be dolphin, he said, and leaned back on the line to see if it was possible to gain any on his fish. To gain line, right? So he remembered the line is across his shoulder, the line is very tight, and then he wants to see if he can gain some line. But he could not, and it stayed at the hardness and water drops shivering that proceed breaking. The boat moved ahead slowly, and he watched the aeroplane until he could no longer see it.